Smarter slotting, best practices and technologies for the efficient warehouse with an eye toward the future. Well, joining us to speak about that today is Dan Basmajian, president of Optricity. Dan, welcome.
Thanks, Russell.
Dan, I know you've been in the business for quite a number of years, and as you've looked at developments in slotting technology, what would you say are the most recent developments, and what has been the effect of them in the warehouse?
That's a great question, Russell. Actually, we have to start with the recent developments in hardware technology. The speed of notebook computers and desktop computers that are very inexpensive, readily available, allow us to make vast improvements in what we can do with slotting technology. We got lots more memory to deal with in those computers. Therefore, we can solve slotting problems in different ways from how we've done it in the past. So that's one of the big benefits that we have. We have a lot more power, horsepower, to come up with better technologies to solve the problem. So what does that do? Well, when it comes to slotting, what it means is that we can come up with better ways to solve the problems using the advanced mathematics that you have to be familiar with in order to solve a slotting type problem. So with more computer power, we get to use better technologies, better techniques to solve the problem, leading to more efficient answers, better optimal answers in the pick line when we're slotting. So that's number one. Number two, we can do it much faster. We use a technique called in-memory computing to come up with solutions very, very quickly. Why is that important? That's important because when we generate slotting solutions, we don't want to be limited to the first answer that we generate based on some set of goals and constraints that we're dealing with. We want to look at alternative scenarios and then be able to choose from multiple alternative scenarios, choose the one that makes the most sense to us. So that speed allows us to generate those alternative scenarios in a very short period of time. And that's just very, very important. The next thing I would mention is that the power of the computer is allowing us to present the information in a format other than just tables and numbers and things that are hard to get through. We can use a graphical user interface that can convey information far better than numbers. That information comes out also very quickly because of the power of the computer. So those are two things. The third thing I would mention is that we're able to spend more time on slotting. Slotting is different from profiling. The term is always confused. Profiling is when we take the active SKUs that we want to put in our pick line and we choose the proper rack type that's out there. So it's a marrying of items to rack type. That's what most people do when they think about slotting. They're actually doing profiling. Because of the computer power that we have out there, we can spend more time on the actual slotting exercise, which has more to do not only with choosing the proper rack type into which to put a product, but also the location, the actual license plate in the distribution center to optimize the placement of that product to effectively make picking a much easier task.
You know, it's fair to say, I would think, that warehouse managers are hard-pressed these days to try to cut costs where they can, increase productivity where they can. When you're in the field, when you're speaking with these folks, and when you're on the floor with them, what are you hearing from them? What are the topics that are on your mind in terms of the concerns that they have to achieve the kind of productivity we're talking about and cost containment that we're talking about?
Yeah, another good question, Russell. 8 out of 10 times when I talk with folks on the field, they don't talk so much about the day-to-day picking activities. They pretty much have that under control. The concerns usually center on unusual activities that are out there. So promotional activities, if there is such a thing in any particular industry, and seasonal changes in demand that require that the folks on the floor inside the four walls of a distribution center make changes to where their product is. So those need to be proactively addressed as opposed to reactively addressed. So of course everybody focuses on the changes, and that's what they bring up most of the time. So slotting, it's a daily activity to make sure you have product in the right locations at the right time. But what we need to focus on is where we can make the most changes, the most effective changes when we're dealing with the slotting function. So it's mostly seasonal and promotional. New item additions to the pick line a big problem for people. I used to say spend a lot of time slotting those items perfectly when they arrive, and that was 25 years ago when I put in my very first pick line slotting software. Now it's like, no, we don't have enough information to handle those new items optimally when they come in the door, so slot them to the best empty location that you can find until you gather up enough data to put them in an optimal location. So it's just another area. The SKU proliferation that's out there now is another one of those exceptional things that people on the floor are concerned about on a regular basis.
You know, when you're speaking with folks in the real world, the practical world, who are thinking about making investments in this kind of technology, clearly you're making a case for a smarter, more efficient slotting procedure. I'd like to hear what the case is that you make to them, but perhaps more importantly, I'd like to hear what you tell them when they say, I'm going to have a difficult time selling this to my boss. I'm interested in this tool, but I'm not quite sure how to sell it to him. What do you tell that person?
Well, for one thing, the boss of a person in the four walls of a distribution center may not even understand the concept of slotting to the same level as the person that has to live it every day. Pictures tell great stories, and so one of the most important things for someone on the floor to be able to do with his boss is show using a visibility component, like drawing out the warehouse, drawing out all the slots, color coding different attributes of product to determine, for example, a heat map where your fast-moving items are in the facility and where they really need to go and so forth in picture form for those folks that don't want to dig through the numbers to understand the problem. This requires software that can do that, of course. But once you do it, you're able to convey the message that you need help in a particular area like pick line slotting to move product to better locations, because the returns are rather large, and the level of effort to get those returns is not rather large. So buy-in, senior management buy-in is really critical. It's done best through pictures, because folks out there sometimes don't really understand the ins and outs of slotting. That same buy-in also applies to the folks on the floor who do the work. The selectors of product, even the replenishers of product out there, need to buy into the concept of having slotting software help optimize the location of that product and how it's actually going to help them do their job more efficiently. They could probably earn more money, actually, if they're incented that way by selecting from more optimal locations.
That's interesting. Draw a picture and make the case. Draw a picture perhaps of the money that they're going to save as well. Dan, I want to thank you so much for sitting down and meeting with us today.
Thank you, Russell.
That's Dan Basmajian, Optricity, and speaking with us today about smarter slotting. Well, thank you for watching.